is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's tied. He throws. It is.
The agony of defeat.
Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
Fred Lynn was the first player in baseball history to win MVP and Rookie of the Year in the same year, and he is on the cover of the July 7th, 1975 issue of Sports Illustrated. 50 years later, we're still talking about him. Hey there, everyone. Hope you had a great 4th of July, and welcome to the Past Our Prime podcast. I'm Scott Johnson, joined by my two other hosts, Mark Hoffman and Bill Mahoney. And guys, May 5th, we had Dan Shaughnessy of the Boston Globe on to talk about this amazing season by Fred Lynn. Mark and I were talking with Dan. Bill was at a petting zoo that day, or a farm, or whatever the hell you were that day.
Yep.
That was one of the funniest moments of our show. Dan has a bit of a reputation for being tough to deal with. I'll tell you, that did not prove to be the case whatsoever. Couldn't have been nicer. And Bill, you couldn't get out of this commitment that you had that day with a field trip with your daughter.
Yep. It was at a petting farm, and right at the time, and I walked away. They were doing their little lunch, so I walk away about maybe 40 feet away. And right at that time, I think some goats are walking by. Man, I heard them go, I'm hearing kids and goats, and I'm thinking, oh God, no. Yeah, right as soon as literally I looked around, there's nothing there. All of a sudden, these like 4 goats walk right in behind me. I'm thinking, damn it, don't make any noise. And the one goes, and I thought, oh God.
And then he even said, what's that noise back there?
He did. And Scott's writing me, turn down your volume, put it on mute. And I'm like, I'm doing my best.
Well, like I said, some guests you get right away and you just know they're not going to care. And some guests you're like, he might care. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he does. He says, what is
But I think the fact that when I said, I'm at a petting zoo with my daughter, and her class probably eased it a little bit. If I said, I went to the zoo today.
Yeah. What are you doing to the zoo? I like to look at the animals.
And look, we try to be as flexible when we ask these people to come on, because they get nothing for doing it, so they're doing us a favor. And so, when he says, I can do it Thursday at blah, 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 I rarely come back and go, well, Mark's going to the movies at that time and Bill's at the zoo, I just kind of go, okay, sounds good. And to have of all people, Dan Shaughnessy just go, what is that?
You don't want to know.
And I'm just picturing Bill doing anything he can to find the mute button.
Yeah, I was.
My gosh.
And you know what scene? It's funny. Afterwards, a scene that came to mind. Have you guys ever seen Revenge of the Nerds?
Yep.
And the nerds go over. They're going to go to the Alpha Beta's house. Yeah. And when they come out, he comes out and he shows them 2 condoms, and he goes, hey, it's going to get weird here. Don't worry about it. And then you hear in the background, nah. And I just thought, I don't know why that came out, that maybe someone thinking I'm, having fun with some goats.
Oh, I'm just thinking, here we have this, Hall of Fame writer on, and the next thing he knows, first of all, we didn't get a chance to introduce Bill because
I just show up.
Just called in, and he's like, who the hell's calling in? They got Farmer Bill calling.
Exactly. Yeah, there, did it.
Said you're the goat of all time, so in your honor,
we
brought some goats.
You should have jumped that one. No, Bill always likes to, bring in who he thinks is the GOAT. That's our sound effect.
Yeah.
Thank God he didn't nibble on me. The one guy got a hold of my shirt, though, and chewed a hole in it. So
too funny. Marcus called in from New Zealand, New York, New Mexico, and New Hawaii. And today we're talking about a guy who was the toast of New England. More on Fred Lynn in a bit. But first, if you want to know about a crappy movie from the 70s, Mark, he's your guy.
It's not crappy. We have talked about Rollerball before.
Yes.
And it's movie talk in the magazine. Sam Moses does the review and he says, it's sure to be Sacco, but the blow by blow is a bloody bore. So he wasn't like he doesn't really rip the film, but he just says that, all the violence was kind of just like, A bloody
bore is not two thumbs up. Let's just put it that way.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's funny because it becomes a cult classic. Anytime you remake a film, even if the remake is a piece of crap, which the remake was.
It was. Yeah.
But it tells you that the first film has an audience, has a niche, has a following.
So, Mark, tell us about a good movie that you've seen recently.
Isn't the Sierra Madre one good?
Oh, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
There you go.
That came out 80 years ago. You were telling me about the Mariska Hargitay.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually a documentary. But yeah, so HBO Max has it on, and it's called My Mom Jane. It's a documentary by Mariska Hargitay of Law and Order fame. And her mom was James Mansfield, who, if people don't know, was a huge sex symbol, like in the 50s and 60s, was competition to Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
And she died in a horrific car accident with her kids in the back seat. So Mariska was one of 3 kids in the back seat. And they survived. Obviously, her mom and 2 other people in the car didn't. And she really didn't, she was 3 at the time. She really didn't get to know her mom. And this was kind of a self-discovery of what her mom was and stuff like that. And it's a really, really well-made documentary. It's on HBO Max right now, and I highly recommend anyone to watch it.
Great. Good. Looking forward to that, Mark. Sounds like a good one. My kids, I mean, they have seen Law and Order, SVU. When I go to the bathroom in the night, I hear dun dun. It is on 24/7 here. They just love that show. That gets us to one of my favorite parts of the magazine, the scorecard. And as we've been talking about, this is the 50-year anniversary of the release of the classic movie Jaws, not Rollerball, but Jaws. Dan Ratner publishes 5 weekly newspapers in the Hamptons where the movie is fictionally supposed to take place. In the movie, the shark feasts on a dozen would-be swimmers. So Ratner is having some fun with it. In a front-page letter, he writes, "It would be a good idea to allay the fears of some of your readers that a big shark might eat them up this summer. For one thing, the number of people eaten by the shark is nowhere near half dozen a day, as shown by the movie. Through careful feeding of the man-eater, we have now reduced the number of people lost to the shark in any given day to just one, maybe 2 at the most." The letter held out promise of cutting that number to where, quote, even less than 1 tourist a day may be eaten. And it was signed by Martin Brody, the name of the police chief in the movie, played by Roy Scheider. So good job by Dan Ratner having fun with what was freaking out a lot of beachgoers 50 years ago.
Okay, I'll go. We all jog from time to time. I know Mark does. I know I do. Scott, do you still jog?
I have just started to.
Okay, but we've never had any issues with being robbed, have we? I know I haven't. I know Mark hasn't.
Not if you run fast enough.
That's true. But Alfred Nichols reported to the Baltimore police that 2 strangers interrupted his run along a roadway and forced him inside their car at gunpoint. Then they drove him to an isolated area and demanded more money. He gave him $10. Then they wanted more, so he gave them an additional 164 he had hidden in one sneaker. Then, come on, insult to injury. Nichols said the bandits told him to get out and start running. When he did, they fired a shot at him, hitting him in the left thigh.
Oh my gosh.
Come on.
That's more than just robbery. That's attempted murder.
Exactly. Fortunately, I've never had that done to me, and I sometimes run at night like you used to do, Scott, in a very tough neighborhood, mind you.
Yeah, back in the day, yeah. No, my biggest concern now when running or walking at night is coyotes.
Yeah, coyotes won't hurt you. They're looking for small things, You're too big.
You tell that to the guy that got eaten by the coyote.
I remember I was on the phone with my buddy Mike Kwan, and I came across 3 coyotes. And I remember reading that they won't hurt you. So they were all looking at me. I mean, they were 10 feet, 15 feet away. And so I kind of took a step towards them like, oh, they're more afraid of me than I am. And they didn't budge. And I was like, well, I'm not sure I want to put this theory to test. So I kind of turned around and went the other direction.
Were they licking their lips as they were looking at you? Were they salivating?
They were pretty hungry. Yeah.
Let me follow that story. When we were in Arizona, that was during hockey season, we would do spring training. A friend of mine was going to see a hockey game, and she was going to a bar. What is it? Yard house out there. She goes, "Oh, there's a bunch of coyotes in the yard house." And at first I thought, oh my gosh. But no, she meant the Arizona coyotes. There was a couple of guys. I just thought, oh man.
Now there's none.
Yeah. Now if she said that, there would truly be coyotes in the bar.
Right.
Oh my God.
Right. Mark, what do you got?
Well, you know how they say some baseball people like eat, drink, and sleep baseball? Well, Billy Scripture of the Southern League's Jacksonville Sun is definitely someone that eats baseball, because when he gets upset, he doesn't punch a locker or kick a water cooler. What he does is he chews on baseballs, biting off their covers. He says he's only lost 1 molar so far, and that's a whole less expensive than getting an ulcer operation.
Yeah. Although he does sound like he might need some
I don't know if you can find
some therapy.
that.
They said it.
John L. Greer, whose foolish pleasure will meet Ruffian in a match race this Sunday, or back in 75. Match races are an entirely different club of possums from regular races. I'm not sure what club of possums means.
Yeah, I don't either. That's like...
Doesn't sound good.
No. Of course, possums are known to play dead, and this match race went horribly wrong as the great Ruffian had to be put down after shattering her leg in the race. And Bill, we have someone who had firsthand account of that tragic day coming up in just a bit.
Yeah, Dave Johnson. You just said track announcer. He's been around for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years doing this. He'll go through the whole situation that happened out there in 1975 with Ruffian and Foolish Pleasure.
Yeah, not a good day for anyone, but the horse racing world, obviously incredibly shaken up by the tragic events of that day. So we're going
and it still resonates to this day.
Oh yes.
Yeah, no question.
You haven't seen any match races between 2 horses any?
No.
All right, let's talk. It was like old times. Cover guy on this issue of Sports Illustrated is Fred Lynn, who's having a breakout rookie season with the Red Sox. And for the first time in years, the top 2 teams in the AL East are the Yankees and the Red Sox. And they are led by a couple of great catchers, Thurman Munson, the captain of the Yankees, and Carlton Fisk, who would later that year hit the famous HR in Game 6 of the World Series. Billy, these guys were kind of the heart and soul of these teams.
Oh, they were I mean, obviously Johnny Bench at the time, but 2 of the best catchers in baseball. But I always wondered, who do you guys think? I mean, you can't really, it's hard to compare it because Fisk played 24 years, Munson played 11. Who do you guys think is the if Munson had played that entire year or entire 24 years, what do you guys think? Who would be the best catcher? Who do you guys have?
I don't. Munson doesn't look like he could have played 24 years just with his body shape. I think the weight would have gotten to him. You know, Fisk was a little leaner, I think. Munson was more stocky, and of course, we'll never know after obviously his plane crash and passing at such a young age.
I would go with Fisk just because he really had some big power years, more with the White Sox actually than with the Red Sox. But you know, Munson was a good hitter. I don't think he ever even hit 20 home runs, so he wasn't like a power guy. I don't know, like in terms of actually catching, I think they were both good catchers.
Yeah.
Neither of them were the best catcher in baseball. Johnny Bench was the best.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But
both leaders too, but Fisk ended with 376 home runs. Munson, due to obviously what we know about, he finished with 113. I don't think if he even played 13 more years, he would have caught Fisk in that. But I do believe in the RBI department, Fisk had 1330 over his career. Munson only had a 701. I think there was an outside chance if Munson, like Mark said, if he could have stayed healthy and stuff like that, might have passed him in the RBI department.
I mean, a catcher and pretty much playing catcher. I know he played a little bit of third base, maybe a little outfield, but Fisk was a catcher for 24 years. That is insane.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe Munson gets to 20 years or even 15 years is a long time for a catcher.
But you wonder if they would have moved him to like a first base, because he was a good hitter. His
Or
average was
DH.
292 career.
Yep. For now, both teams are in a dogfight for the division title. Remember, no wild cards 50 years ago. So you win the division or you go home. And as of now, the Yanks are in first place, despite what Bill Lee says. He called them a team of vagabonds with bad wheels. And he said that partly because their outfield of Roy White, Elliot Maddox, and Bobby Bonds all were dealing with leg injuries. Sox win the first of the 4-game set behind Louis Tiant to cut New York's lead in the AL East to a half game. Game 2 of the series, it's why Fred Lynn is on the cover. He has a big game. Rick Wise gets the win. Sox move into first place. Yankees come back and win Game 3, beating that Bill Lee, but the Sox win Game 4, beating Catfish Hunter, and they would not fall out of first place again the rest of the season. A great season in Fenway for the Red Sox, Mark.
Right, but it's the last hurrah for the Red Sox because the Yankees, starting that following season, are going to dominate the division. It was the Red Sox year, but it's about to become the Yankees dynasty again.
Yep. They win the division, go to the series, and get swept by the Reds in 76. And then they beat the Dodgers in 6 and 77 and 78. So a good 3-year run here for the Yankees. Wagering at center court, Gad Sir. Before there was DraftKings or FanDuel, Wimbledon introduced gambling on the matches in 1975. Some bets as little as 10 pence, which is a quarter. Some into the thousands of pounds. The favorite to win? Easy. Jimmy Connors on the men's side, Chrissy Everett on the women's side. Which brings me to this, Bill. What was the Love Double?
The Lovebird Double was you bet on Everett and Connors to both repeat as champions.
Oh, wow.
And that's obviously a pretty good bet there since they were, the two best in tennis at that point.
Right.
Yep,
right.
but neither of them won that year.
Yeah.
Oh.
I remember the thing I remember about 1975 was Arthur Ashe winning. To me, it was like groundbreaking that he had won it, and it was such a big deal, I mean, Connors made it to the finals, but Ashe, that wasn't even close to the finals they had, which I guess we'll be discussing in the next issue.
Right. Yeah. But no, it was, Connors was the number one player in the world, and it was news when he was losing sets, let alone matches. Right. And it was a huge upset when Arthur Ashe beat him. Connors gets to the quarters without losing a set, including an easy win over Britain's own John Lloyd. Of course, Jimmy and Chris Everett were no longer engaged, and Chris would eventually marry John Lloyd in 1979 before they divorced 8 years later in 87. Chrissy Everett's also cruising, hasn't lost a match to anyone since April, but she's never beaten Billie Jean King on grass. The two appear headed towards a semifinal match. But Billy, there was something else about this tournament that grabbed your attention.
When I read the name Vijay Armitage, I knew he was an Indian tennis player, and he had wins over Connors and Borg and McEnroe. But then I thought, why does that name sound familiar? Well, maybe because outside of tennis, he was best known as the MI6 intelligence operative Vijay in the James Bond film Octopussy.
Really?
Yeah, I knew that name. I kept thinking, why, when I was young, I knew that Vijay Armitage was in Octopussy is beyond me. It's just one of those quick memories that pop in. I thought, oh my God, yeah, that's how I remember Vijay Armitage, more from that movie than The Court.
Though I have to say that was one of the worst Bond films.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I don't remember the movie. I remember him in the movie.
It was Roger Moore's, I want to say, his second to last Bond film. The last one was View to a Kill. It wasn't just the same, and the villains weren't as good. Oh God, why am I blanking on the French actor? Louis Jourdan was the bad guy in that film.
Well, I loved it.
That's because it was made after 19 what?
As much as you love the Sierra Madre movie.
Can't get enough.
Badges? We don't need stinking badges.
Right?
Yeah.
They'll burn from the start. The match race between Ruffian and Foolish Pleasure is coming up. These races are rare. Now they're non-existent, but it will be a $350,000 match race. $225,000 goes to the winner, $125,000 to the loser, between the best 3-year-olds of each sex over the Derby distance of 1.25 miles. Pleasure has never lost as a never lost, I should say, as a 2-year-old. After winning the Derby, came about a length combined of winning the Preakness and the Belmont. Great horse, and yet Ruffian, an even better horse, one of the all-time greats. She's never lost a race. She's never even trailed in a race.
Right. Well, Jacinto Vasquez that we had on the show, so he's ridden both horses, but he's going to ride, I believe, Ruffian in this one.
Yeah. I mean, think of that. He wins the Derby on Foolish Pleasure.
Right.
And when given the choice of who he wants to ride in the match race, he gets off the Derby winner to ride Ruffian. That says a lot about
what's really interesting is, though, he says, that she's never been in a fight, and that had him worried. And he knew this would be a fight going against Foolish Pleasure. Yeah,
it didn't. It's kind of like Bobby Chacon last week. It wasn't much of a fight. It ended rather quickly. We know how this ends tragically. We'll talk about that a bit more in the coming weeks. But one of the darkest days in horse racing history. I don't think any story that has come to my attention since starting the show has touched me as much as the one about Ruffian. It's tough to put into words what that was like 50 years ago, but there was one man whose job was to do just that, put into words what the sports world was witnessing. Dave Johnson is one of the greatest announcers of all time, and when it comes to the horses, there is nobody better than Dave, synonymous with the big races of the 70s and 80s, with both NBC and ABC Sports, and still active to this day. There's a 3-hour show on Sirius XM from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC Sports Audio, Channel 85, with his co-host Bill Finley, called, of course it's called this, Down the Stretch, Dave's signature call. Dave and Bill preview the day's best races, get you caught up on all things going on in the world of horse racing. And Dave joins us now. How are you, good sir?
I'm fine, Scott, and I'm delighted to be with you. And just picking up on one thing you said, there was one thing that I said when the microphone was on, but just like anybody else, I have a lot of feelings and a lot of friends in the game. So there are a lot of stories which never went over that microphone, whether it was on television or at the track. So it's fun to relive them. Hard to believe it was 50 years ago, but it's nice to think back of the good people in the game.
Yeah. I often, when I talk to my guests who are often in their 70s and 80s, I go, do you prefer 50 years ago or half a century? But 50 years ago, the eyes of the sporting world was on this match race between Kentucky Derby winner Foolish Pleasure and the unbelievable filly Ruffian. Dave, if you can, try and set the stage for us. What was the mood like heading into this race between these two phenomenal horses?
I think the New York Racing Association, in a terrific marketing job, captured what was happening, Scott, because what happened was that people chose sides. They either went with Foolish Pleasure, the Kentucky Derby winner, or this incredible filly, Ruffian. And so there were T-shirts. I like the Colt, or I like the filly. There were buttons, so people came in that day on the Sunday of the holiday. It was just like it is this week, this year, with the holiday falling on Friday, and the match race was on Sunday, July the 6th. So as they streamed into the track, and it was a huge crowd at Belmont, they could ask for a button that said, I like the filly or I like the Colt. So everybody had a focus. And that was the lead up was great. Now, Charles C. Canty and I are old friends. We did the broadcasts on ESPN and ABC together for years. And Frank was not as sold on the match race as the people and Naira and the owners of and trainer of Foolish Pleasure. But he did it, and of course, it ended tragically. But it happened. And so everybody had a focus. You like the Colt, you like the filly. There was betting, of course. Ruffian was the favorite. She was 40 cents on the dollar, as 90 cents on the dollar for Foolish Pleasure. So, they went to the gate. It was just unbelievably electric as these two horses went on to and of course, the starting gate for the match race was way on the backstretch. And they came out, and it was electric. I was the track announcer at the time. It was being done on CBS with Chick Anderson was calling it, but I was the track announcer for the track. And of course, a quarter of a mile into it, she broke down, and the match race was basically over. And I simply said, "The Colt is in front," and shut off the microphone. But that was the lead up, and unfortunately, the tremendous crash.
Right, right. So you mentioned Ruffian goes down pretty quickly. You're a pro's pro, but what are you thinking? What are you feeling in this moment? I mean, when horses go down, it's not good.
It's never good when they pull up, even if the jockey pulls up out of caution. It's never good to see these magnificent animals pull up, and she went down. And some little things that people probably don't know. The horse ambulance came out immediately, and a man named Blue drove the horse ambulance. And I saw the horse ambulance from my vantage point, and I was just basically in the announcer's booth. I didn't say much, believe me, Scott, but I saw the horse ambulance come out, and Blue got out of the ambulance, and he put up the green shield like a canopy to shield people, as Bill Knack said, to shield people from their feelings, that was Bill Knack's line, because it happened. He saw it too. So we knew that it was tragic, to say the least. And of course, she was taken off the track. They put an air cast on her front leg, but she had tried to run while her legs were broken, and that's what did her in. Of course, like a human being, we're told don't move, but you can't do that to a horse. So that was the buildup, the first quarter mile, and the tremendous Dumas.
But when you saw the Ruffian go down, how did you stay composed? I mean, you had to be looking at that and just being stunned and stunned silent.
Bill, my thoughts go to the people around these horses, and of course, Foolish Pleasure was on his way to the winner's circle and ignominious fame. But I thought about Mr. Whiteley and Braulio Baeza and Charles E. Canty, who was her exercise rider, and then the people that loved her so much, and even my friends in the press like Bill Knack and Marshall Cassidy, who was my assistant, and so when those things happen, if you have such a personal connection with the people involved in it, that's what happened to me. I just saw what was happening, and it was just. I'll tell you the key word that week, and it lasted from then to several days after, and it was crying. I didn't work on Monday or Tuesday. There was no racing, so I didn't come in. This was Sunday. And so every time on Wednesday, you would see somebody, they would start to cry. Grown men, Pat Lynch in the press office of Bill Ney, everybody started to cry as soon as you'd see them or lock eyes with them. And Charles, told me that around the barn the next morning, it was nothing but crying. And Mr. Whiteley would try and make it as if it wasn't happening. And he'd say, "Get on this set of horses." And they'd go out. And Charles, told me as they were coming through the stretch, they all turned their heads to the right because they couldn't look where Ruffian was being buried on the infield.
Oh.
These are little stories that I don't think ever even got in print. But that's what happened for me and for everyone I think involved. It's the human connection with other people.
I know that Ruffian had just was coming off winning the Philly Triple Crown. How great of horse was she?
Oh, we'll never know. I mean, she was, this was the first time that she ever ran against the boy. I mean, against another sex, but she was so incredible. I mean, she was undefeated. She won everything. And she did it so effortlessly, so easily. I remember when she was a 2-year-old, Pat Lynch, who was used to be a writer for a New York newspaper, but was in charge of the PR. She won so easily as a 2-year-old. He said to me, "You just saw the 2-year-old champ, and she's only had a couple races." She was special. She was an absolutely special animal, and she proved it on the racetrack.
If the incident had not happened, do you think Ruffian would have won the race? How do you think the race would have unfolded had it gone the full distance?
I thought she would win the race, Mark. I really did. I thought before the race that she would win it. Maybe it's because and I play horses. I still play horses today. I'll probably bet a couple this afternoon. Forget about those brain. I don't want to mention any names, but forget about those medicines. My doctor said, "You just keep playing the horses, Dave, and doing a crossword puzzle every once in a while." That's it's. I'm just projecting, but she was so good. I thought she'd win. I really did.
And then I guess the next question would be is what kind of career would she have had? Would she go down as one of the all-time greats? Would we be holding her like in the same esteem as we do Secretariat or something?
Mark, she is one of the all-time greats. So what more could have happened? Look, they all get beat, but boy, it's hard for me to think that Ruffian would have been beaten. Man, she was something special. And you don't see that, with the thousands of thoroughbreds. I mean, I was calling races for 50 years. I don't call them anymore, but how many thousands of horses that I saw at Fairmount Park and Cahokia and Santa Anita, Aqueduct, Belmont, Saratoga, Hialeah, Monmouth. It's just amazing. She was something. I can't, I want to think about, it'd be great if she was champion, but she was a champion for those of us who loved her.
We had Jacinto Vasquez on the show, and he said that he didn't like the idea of a match race. He thought it was not a good idea. Leading up to the race, was there a lot of people talking about, oh, we shouldn't be doing this? Or was it just, oh, no, this is a great idea?
There were a few. There's always a few naysayers, but I mean, look, even personally, I was happy to see it. Of course, I worked for the New York Racing Association. It was a huge buzz. Who would have dreamed that it would have ended this way? I mean, one of them was going to win and one was going to lose. But it's hard to believe that it happened. But I know that Mr. Whiteley wasn't 100%. He just did it because there was such groundswell of fans and New York racing that wanted it.
Dave, that was 50 years ago, and it's etched in history. It will never be forgotten. But less than a week ago, Hall of Fame trainer D. Wayne Lucas passed. Dave may be the greatest trainer of all time. His resume is unmatched. Tell me how you and D. Wayne met each other.
I was the track announcer at Santa Anita in 77, 78. I was there for 6 or 7 years. And in 1979, Scott, Wayne transitioned, in the late 70s, from being a quarter horse trainer, who he was very, very, very good. But he transitioned into thoroughbreds. And on a Monday lunch, Santa Anita scheduled us both to an Optimist or a Rotary Club, I can't remember, but it was in Arcadia, California. So this is when Wayne and I really got to know each other. We sat next to each other at lunch. And I answered questions from the audience. Wayne, who, as you said, passed away at 89, at age 89, just this past week, he made a little speech. And Scott, there was one line in it which I'll never forget. He said to the guys at the luncheon, he said, I haven't won the Kentucky Derby yet, but he said, when you see me in the winner's circle, you will know that I spent 200,000 hours getting there. That's how much I want it. And he said, if I can do it, and I will, you can do anything you want. Wow. I mean, that's what he said, and it's almost verbatim. I mean, I'll never forget that, and I only heard it once, more than 50 years ago. And he was the Pied Piper because he could do that, and he won what 15 Triple Crown races and 20 Breeders' Cups races. I mean. But his passing was completely different than Ruffian's because Ruffian's was so unexpected, and we knew that Mr. Lucas had just retired from racing and basically retired, and it was because of health. So, but I'm so glad he didn't suffer a lot and go into a hospital. He was a wonderful, wonderful friend for all those years since the 70s.
Yeah, you mentioned he was 89 years old, and it was going to take a lot for him to retire. He won a race on the 12th of June. I mean, if that doesn't exemplify his work ethic, I don't know what does.
You know, he would even, and he said he was not too proud to ask his help to help him get up on the horse. But even at 80, 88, 89 years old, I know Steve Kornacki of NBC gave an interview that was Lucas and Kornacki was on the ground, and Lucas was on the horse, and this was prior to the Preakness 2 years ago, and he went out on the horse every day at age 88. You know, incredible. So, and of course he won a Triple Crown race, the oldest in history.
I know you mentioned his some of his resume, but how did Lucas revolutionize horse racing?
He did it before he came along, trainers would stay in one spot. They'd have their barn or their horses at one track or one circuit, but Lucas completely blew it up. He would run horses in California where he was stabled. He'd run them in New York for the good ones. In Florida, he'd run them in Chicago, and wherever his horses fit, and he would then have strings so that they cared about it being Lucas University. But all these wonderful trainers today, Todd Pletcher and Dallas Stewart and all of these, Mark Hennig, all of these assistants who now have gone out on their own, they then would manage a stable of his at various locations. Randy Bradshaw, just wonderful guys that he taught the game to. And that's how he revolutionized the sport, because he would ship horses. And before that, everybody stayed in their own bailiwick.
You know, there's a lot of names out there: Bob Baffert and Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, Charlie Winningham, Todd Pletcher. Is Dwayne Lucas the best trainer ever?
Gee, these are wonderful people. Sonny Jim and
Yep.
Baffert is tremendous. It's hard for me, Bill, to say the best. I like them all, but he certainly towers over the rest of them in his accomplishments and what he did and how he treated people. You know, he on his way to the winner's circle, whether it be a really cheap claimer or, a nothing race, he would see people who were cheering for him, his horse, then he would grab them and bring them into the winner's circle. as completely unbeknownst to them. And can you imagine what it would be like rooting for a Wayne Lucas horse, and he's watching you, and as soon as the horse wins, he grabs your arm and says, "Let's go to the winner's circle and get your picture taken." And he'd do that. And I know a couple other owners and trainers who now picked up on that. Isn't that a terrific? That's the kind of a man he was.
Does that say something about his personality, how outgoing he was, and maybe
Yes.
set him apart from any other trainer, not just for his accomplishments, on the racetrack?
Exactly, Mark. That's exactly how it set him apart, because he brought that wonderful fun and energy and love of the game, especially with the younger crowd. He just loved to bring kids into the winner's circle with their parents and then get them up and get an address and have them sent a picture. Isn't that something?
What made him different? I mean, there's so many great trainers, and it's not just the success on the ring, on what you accomplish with your horses, but what was about him that made him special? Was there something he could see in a horse and recognize right away, this is a special horse?
Two things. He was, first of all, the human. He was a coach. They call him the coach. But, he grew up in Wisconsin, and he was a coach, a basketball coach, I think, and so he had a human touch with him. But in terms of the horse, he used to say to me, "I can always see the cat in the horse." That's what he'd say, and he's the only one who ever said it. "I can see the cat." So when a horse would walk into the ring or be exercising or whatever, he could see what that horse's potential was. So that's human, and how he did vis-a-vis humans and the animal.
D. Wayne was quoted as saying in 2014 in his acceptance speech for the 2013 Eclipse Award of Merit, he stated, quote, "When they start giving you awards, they are trying to get you to retire. Well, you young trainers, get ready, because I'm not retiring. We're coming after you, so you'd better get up a little more early in the morning from now on. We're coming after you with a vengeance." He was 78 years old when he said that. That just personifies him, doesn't it, Dave?
Isn't that great? And he had a drought of, a long drought of maybe from 2000 to 2017, where he didn't win a Triple Crown race. But as you said, he never stopped. And he was still buying 2-year-olds for people, last year. It's an incredible resume for a wonderful person who happened to be a horse trainer.
How much, and it's going to be sort of obvious here, how much respect did all the other trainers have when Dwayne Lucas walked into a room?
Later in life, it was more because he was our favorite uncle, or sort of like, I remember when he won the Pennsylvania Derby, all of the other trainers and jockeys waited in his path to the winner's circle to congratulate him. I know Baffert did an interview, and he was crying during the interview. So this is a little different than it was when at the start of, back in the 70s and 80s, because he was winning so much, and he had come from, and so had Baffert, from the quarter horse industry into the thoroughbred industry, and a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people in the game, they considered him an outsider until he was in his probably 70s, and then they realized what a incredible person he was, in addition to being a horse trainer.
So we do a trivia segment here on the show called 50-50. I give you a 50% chance of getting a trivia question right from 50 years ago. So,
oh my God.
So
well,
anyway,
I'm good at this. But fire away.
Okay. Well, so this isn't 50 years ago, so we take a liberty with it. But you were actually involved in this. There was a TV movie called Ruffian that I think was made in 2007, and I believe you were a track announcer in the film, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that was easy casting, wasn't it? But I'll tell you what I didn't. You want to hear what I didn't like about it?
Okay.
they had me sit down to call the race, and they had me smoking a cigar.
Ah,
And they had the cigar in an ashtray next to my microphone, which was a standard microphone, not a headset microphone, which of course I used for more than 50 years. So so it was that was the movie Ruffian. The best movie I ever made. I wasn't on camera, but I called the races, was Farlap, because the people who made Farlap, it was the most honest and beautiful representation of the racehorse that I have ever seen. If you ever see it, you got to watch how they filmed and took care of the horses. So that's two different things.
My wife will love that because she grew up with horses and she cannot stand to see any horse be harmed in any way.
Yeah.
But back to the trivia question. So in this movie, Ruffian,
Yeah.
true or false, okay? Sam Shepard played Frank Whiteley in the film. True or false, he was actually nominated for a SAG award for Best Actor.
I think he was.
You are correct. Outstanding
Yeah.
performance by a male actor in a
Yeah.
television movie or miniseries. He was
Yeah, he was
not.
terrific. Yeah.
And they said he looked a lot like Frank. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't know. I knew I knew, yeah, I knew Frank more than, yeah, but Shepard was good.
yeah, yeah. He could play anything. Hey, Dave, I want to talk to you. My favorite call of yours was the 1989 Preakness between Sunday Silence and Easy Goer, a race for the ages.
Midway on the turn, Gansel on the outside to the front. On the outside, here comes Sunday Silence to challenge. Now they're heads apart. Sunday Silence with Pat Valenzuela takes the lead at the quarter pole. Easy Goer back into second position. Gansel coming on third in the stretch. On the outside, it's Sunday Silence. On the inside, Easy Goer. And down the stretch they come. On the outside, it's Sunday Silence. Easy Goer with Pat Day. Back to challenge. Heads apart. Easy Goer on the inside with a slight lead. On the outside, Sunday Silence. The rest of them far back. Here's the finish of the Preakness. Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. Photo finish. Noses apart. I can't tell. But on the outside, Sunday Silence with Pat Valenzuela.
What do you remember about that race?
Oh, I remember a lot of it because it's the best race I ever saw, and I happened to be calling it. And it was Sunday Silence and Easy Goer at Pimlico in the Preakness. And basically, that race is the marrow of our sport. It's two horses and two jockeys giving it their all. And if you ever listen to my call, I don't call the finish because it was a nose bob. And I didn't know who won it, and I wasn't going to make a guess. That would have been wrong for me to do. So it was just so exciting. It was the best race I ever saw. It was Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. And those were two magnificent horses, and Pat Day and Pat Valenzuela, two great jockeys.
Dave, I know you're mostly retired, but can you briefly tell us about that Sirius XM radio show you do every Saturday from 10 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the NBC Sports Audio Channel 85? What are you and Bill Finley talking about?
I appreciate that. Keeps my hand in the game. Of course, if I wasn't doing that show, I'd still be following the sport. It's actually it started. We've been on for 20 years now, and it started back then. Sirius came to my agent, who was Don Buchwald at the time, and still was until he passed away less than a year ago. And they said, "What would Dave like to do?" And so Don came to me, and I said, "I would love to do a Saturday morning show, which would preview what was coming up that afternoon or Sunday, and it would be for the fan." So we started at an hour, it became 2 hours and 3 hours, and now it's every Saturday. And basically, Bill Finley and I, as we will this Saturday, talk to people all around the country. I'm sure we'll talk about Wayne Lucas, but we'll also talk about the big races and horses around the country. And then usually Caton Bradar joins us for the last half hour, and we handicap one horse a race so that, it gives the people listening a chance to know who we like in those races. So it's still fun, and it's called Down the Stretch.
You know, Dave, that's what I was just about to say. In every interview, I bet you do, or at least the ones that I saw, that's the first thing they talk about is how'd you come up with down the stretch they come? Is there any chance you could do a down the stretch they come just for us at the end of our show?
I'll tell you how it came about, and of course I will. Um, Back when I was at Santa Anita, I noticed that the evening television broadcast sports would pick up my call. They had it every night, but no matter where I said and down the stretch they come, that's where they picked it up, whether it was at the top of the stretch or at the eighth pole or whatever. And so then people started to say it back to me. I'd be walking out to my car and somebody'd say, down the stretch. I was in Atlanta, Georgia one time with my sister, and we were going from in a mall, one floor to the next, and a guy coming up looked at me and said, and down the stairs he comes. And the good news is that I trademarked it in 2012, and we've been able to raise over a $250,000 from people who have licensed it and used it in movies or ads or whatever. I have never kept a nickel of it. It all goes to racehorse charities. I have 4 scholarships at different universities. And so my good friend Drew Malika, who is the lawyer on this, handles all the paperwork and the negotiations. But we are so proud to have raised that kind of money for racehorse charities and scholarships. I'm looking at one final race, and they're coming into the stretch right now, and Scott is right there, and here comes Bill on the outside, Mark at the rail. The 3 of them are across the track. I'm down the stretch they come. Wire, here's the flyer. Oh, it's a photo finish. Can't call it, fellas.
I think I won. I have the biggest nose, so I think I won by a nose.
When you think horse racing, you may think of the horses, the jockeys, the trainers, but you'll hear one voice in your head, and that voice will be Dave Johnson. Dave, thanks so much for coming on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Yeah.
What a joy. Dave Johnson, the absolute best.
The oldest.
The best. Dave, you're awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dave. Bless you. Thank you, sir. Let's move on. We'll talk a little Mets baseball and Ed Kranepool.
Hey, yeah, Scott, before we get to Ed Kranepool, let me talk about it. There was an article in there. It was called Warming Up for Winter. It's about freestyle skiing. I'm not going to talk about the skiing part. There was one picture in the magazine of a young girl jumping high in the air. That was Susie Chaffee. And Susie Chaffee, if we all remember correctly, I think Mark does. Who is she, Mark?
She was a skier, very famous skier. And if she was more than a skier, she became famous for something else, Bill, right?
Yeah, Susie Chapstick. I remember seeing her on everything that I just thought, wow, Susie Chapstick, great skier, and obviously very camera friendly too. But one good thing and one amazing thing about her, she was the first woman to serve on the board of the U.S. Olympic Committee. Very impressive. But then you go back and you go, okay, let's go back and look at one of the commercials. So she's quite amazing. Here's her commercial. At the end of one of her Susie Chapstick commercials, she says, "Hey, Catfish, can we call you Catfish Chapstick?" Catfish Hunter looks at her and rolls her eyes. No, he's not wearing a Yankee uniform, though. So, hey, we got a guy that we've talked about in this show. So, Catfish Hunter in a Susie Chapstick commercial.
Wow, I didn't know that.
The ads are funny if you go back and look at them, because like a guy will ski up behind her and go,
yeah, tell that, Mark.
Chapstick? And
It's really, yeah, he really just all of a sudden is like right on her. He's like on her back, like, dude.
And then the little kids are like, look, it's Susie Chapstick.
A little space, man. Now let's get to Ed Kranepool. He's a part-time player making $70,000 a year for the Mets. Came up with the Amazons in their expansion season of '62, and he's never left. Didn't have the greatest career. 18 seasons, all with the Mets. He hits .261, not much power or speed. But in 1975, his 14th season, probably his best. He's hitting .336 at the time of this writing, but finished the season at .323. And his relationship with the fans was a funny one. Opening day 1964. Billy, what happened?
Well, they unfurled a banner at Shea Stadium that asked, "Is Ed Kranepool over the hill?" He was 19 years old.
I love that. In 1970, at the age of just 25, he's sent to the minors. And you're thinking maybe this is it, but he climbed back. Could have been done. He stayed with them, I think, another 9 years or so.
Yeah.
He died just recently, too.
Yeah, he just died in September at the age of 79. Ed Kranepool, a name that will always be synonymous with the Mets. So,
and the Ed Kranepool story I've told in the show before is that when I did this interview show on the Dodger Network that Larry King did, we had Jimmy Kimmel on, and Jimmy talked about the fact that Ed Kranepool is the spitting image of Adam Carolla. And if you look at this picture in Sports Illustrated and get a picture of Adam Carolla, you can see it.
yeah, I see
So
it.
they did
Eyebrows and
right, very similar facial structure. So they did a birthday invitation to Adam's birthday party, but they put Ed Kranepool's face on the birthday invitation. So,
oh, that's funny. Very nice. Hey, what's going on elsewhere in baseball, Billy?
I was going to take one from Mark. Mark always does the Tiger ones. But
yep.
I'll take this one this week.
Oh, I wonder why he's not doing this one.
I know. The news from Detroit was bad. 13 errors and 7 losses and 8 tries landed the Tigers in last place, and manager Ralph Houck wound up in court after allegedly manhandling a Baltimore sports writer. Houck reportedly dragged the writer through the clubhouse and shouted, "What right do you have to call my team lousy?" Hey, they did have one victory though that week. They beat the Orioles 6-5. Mark, what's with your Tigers beating up media people?
Well, first of all, this isn't even the worst of it because they said they beat the Orioles 6-5. The 19-game losing streak is coming up. They will beat the Yankees. I believe it was 4-2 behind Vern Rule. That's how much I remember this. And then they proceed to lose 19 games in a row before ending it against your favorite team, Bill, the California Angels.
Everyone does their things against the Angels.
But yeah, so it's going to get worse this summer. They're going to lose 19 in a row, and they will be the laughingstock of baseball.
And at that point, I think we have the right to call them lousy.
Yes, they were lousy. They were lousy that year.
What's going on in the NL East, Mark?
Well, Montreal has a really good pitcher named Steve Rogers. No, not Captain America. No, this is the other Steve Rogers. He silenced the Phillies, winning 4-0. Steve was a mainstay. He played his entire career with the Expos. From 1973 to 85, he was a 5-time All-Star. And Steve was not Captain America. He was Captain Canada, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. Another team in the NL East, the Pirates, one of the better teams of the 70s. They're going to win their division this year. Have a young stud on that team by the name of Dave Parker, Billy.
Yeah, he had hit a couple home runs, giving him 13 on the year. He would hit 25, driving home 101 that year in 75. He won the MVP in 1978, but he just passed away last week, and he was so close, to being inducted into the Hall of Fame or being able to be part of it. Just a sad day. I reached out to Jerry Royce, who told a really fun story about how he pranked Parker in an elevator with Muhammad Ali. And I know him and Jerry were friends, but I just sort of sad to think Dave Parker, when he would come up to bat and they'd play that Cobra music, the little Cobra sound, just awesome. He was just an amazing player.
I will never forget him gunning Brian Downing out at the plate in the 79 All-Star game at the Kingdom. He ended up being a DH for a good part of his career, mostly because he was just a huge dude, man.
Right.
He was so big, but he had a freaking cannon for an arm.
Yep.
And he was a good base stealer. He was a real solid 5-tool player. One of the best of that generation, no question about it. The
Absolutely.
Cobra, Dave Parker. Yeah. Yep.
And also, when you talk about Parker, he's a huge guy, but he had 12 triples in his MVP year. The man could do it all.
Oh, he could run. And, that A's dynasty in the 80s, they had the Bash brothers. They did not win until Parker got there and helped them win that World Series. So, and of course, who will ever forget the 79 Pirates team that he was a part of as well.
Well, if I was a third baseman and I saw Dave Parker coming at me trying to get that triple, I'd say the base is all yours. I'm out of your way.
You got
It's a
it,
good
Big
point,
Dave.
Mark. Good point.
They knew I was a contender. Sounds like something Rocky Balboa would say, but this is Amy Alcott, a rookie on the LPGA Tour. Doesn't act like a rookie nor play like one. On her 19th birthday, last February 22nd, she was in St. Petersburg, Florida, firing a second round 68 en route to winning the Orange Blossom Classic. It's only her third tournament as a professional. She would wind up with a record 9 under par for the event and a check for $5,000. Went on, Mark, to have a pretty good career.
She sure did. She won 5 majors, 29 LPGA events. Truly one of the great women golfers. And more importantly, she graduated from Pali High, Pacific Palisades High School. So she's a Pali girl. And we're going to have her on the podcast in a few weeks. So I'm looking forward to talking to Amy.
Yeah, a Hall of member inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame in 1999. And, I'll be honest with you. I don't know women's golf. I know it from just, being around it and being in the business for a long time. You know who Amy Alcott is. She's one of those, and she's right up there with, Joanne Carner and Nancy Lopez and the greats of that era. So yeah, looking forward to talking with her.
And I remember she really liked working in the kitchen, like at delis. And I remember at Channel 2, they did a feature on her where she's showing you how she's making the sandwiches and all stuff like that. So she was a fun person too.
The Earl of Rasp. Last month, we spoke to Tom Grieve about what it was like to play for Billy Martin. The same, basically shocked me. He said the players loved playing for him. Same can't be said about Earl Weaver. He was a tough SOB, and his players paid the price. He's the 27th winningest manager of all time, and of the 26 ahead of him, only 2 had a higher winning percentage. I got nothing to say about Earl Weaver, grumbled Orioles catcher Andy Etchebarren in spring training last March. I want nothing to do with Earl Weaver. This is a guy who played under him for years. And Bill, tell us about when Bobby Grich was called up to the bigs.
Back in 1970, Grich is coming up from Rochester. So he gets to the Oriole clubhouse, he deposits his gear, then goes to the manager's door and steps into Weaver's office. "What do you want?" were Weaver's first words. "I just want to let you know I'm here." Weaver goes, "That's all?" Flustered, Grich leaves the office. Said Weaver never said another word to him for 5 weeks. Said, "I'm just a small town guy. I'm 21. He's expecting to have a close relationship with Weaver like he did with his minor league managers. Not a chance." But later on, Grich did get Weaver to change his ways. One other guy got called up, Tim Norbrook. Norbrook walks into Weaver's office and says, "Hi, Timmy. Glad to have you." So Grich had talked to Weaver and had him change his ways. But that first time Grich met him, no chance.
Welcome to the bigs.
Yes. Yep. Now get the hell out.
And Mark, it wasn't just young guys that had issues with the fiery Weaver.
Oh, no. His ace, Jim Palmer, 20-game winner 4 times. They would get into it. There was one game where Palmer had struck out, I think, 13 batters by the 8th inning, but the Indians had tied the score 2. So Weaver goes, has his pitching coach go to ask Palmer, "How do you feel?" He says, "I'm exhausted," and then strikes out the next batter on 3 pitches to end the inning. So in the top of the 9th, Palmer was asked to be the third hitter. "How do you feel?" asked Weaver. Palmer said something and turned away from him to get some water, and Weaver then yells, "Don't turn away from me. How do you feel?" And then Palmer turns back and says, "Well, if I was tired 5 minutes ago, it seems I'd still be tired. Get the hell out of here," Weaver stormed. And Palmer stomps to the clubhouse shower quickly in anger. And then I guess whoever came in for him gave up the winning run. And then Weaver gets back into the clubhouse afterwards. But the remarkable thing about Weaver is that he could have a screaming match with someone, and then a few minutes later be buddy-buddy. It's like elephant memory, and we've worked with people like this where they'll scream and yell, and then 5 minutes later they're best friend. They don't hold the grudge,
Yeah, those are lovely people to be around.
That's right. Listen to me. Listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah, Weaver was one of those first guys that, remember the cap backwards and right in the ump's face. And he went after everybody. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube if you look where you just get, they have sound up. Boy, he was an attacker of everybody.
Can I tell a funny story? Um, which I told you all you guys know, but the audience doesn't. So I see the Earl Weaver article on this, and you tell me Dave Johnson's going to be on the show, and I go, Davey Johnson, who played for Weaver and then later managed the Orioles. So I start doing all this research, and I got my trivia question all set, and then all of a sudden you mentioned, yeah, and we talk about Ruffian, and I go, oh, wait a second. That's not the Dave Johnson you're talking about.
Well, that's the funny thing is later I was like, there are some people that like Davey Johnson. I've never heard anyone call him Dave Johnson. You know what I mean? He is Davey Johnson. So I thought you were kidding, but then I got your voice.
No,
just to think if Mark
I'm looking at the Weaver article.
Went to Dave Johnson and started to ask him about, like the Mets and playing for the Orioles. I announced racist there. I know, but you were a power hitter, buddy.
Yeah. What about that scream match you got into with Jim Palmer?
Yeah.
Weaver was a ruffian. You're absolutely right.
Oh my God.
Oh, too funny. All right. And speaking of, and down the stretch they come, let's go to For the Record. I got one. Wendell Ladner, 26, died. He was a reserve New York Net forward. He dies in a plane crash that killed 111 passengers on Eastern Airlines flight number 66 at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. A graduate of the University of Southern Mississippi, the 6'5" Ladner began his professional career with Memphis in the 70-71 ABA season. He was picked for the all-rookie and all-star team, so he's a good player. 11 people survived the crash. He was the only player in the 9-year history of the ABA to lose his life while an active player in the league. So, yeah.
You want to do a sad follow-up on that?
Yeah.
They identified him because they found his championship ring.
Oh, God.
Yep. And that's how they knew he was on it.
Brutal. I'd never heard of him.
Neither have I.
26 years old. Damn it. Faces in the crowd. Mark.
Pat Underwood, who's a junior left-hander on the Kokomo, Indiana high school team. He's thrown 3 no-hitters, a 2-hitter in the span of 15 days. He's 9-3 with an 0.9 ERA, struck out 50 of the 72 batters he faced in the no-hitters. Pat Underwood was later drafted the following year by the Detroit Tigers. He made his debut in the same game that his brother Tom pitched in for Toronto. So it was a brotherly thing. And more importantly, we had Milt Wilcox on the show, and Milt was supposed to start game 2 of Demolition Disco Night in Comiskey Park, the White Sox Tigers doubleheader. That second game was never played because the field was destroyed when they were blowing up all those disco records. But who pitched the opening game for the Tigers? That was Pat Underwood, and he got, I believe, the win in that first game.
Pat Underwood, one of the great pitchers in Mark Hoffman's mind. 19th hole, Bill.
Okay. This is from Michael Pincus. He's from Satterstead, England. He says, what a delightful story on Jim Cott's Jolly Revolution or Rejuvenation. I remember him as one of the better American League pitchers when he was 21 and I was a 9-year-old in the Bronx. It was with nostalgic pleasure that I read of his 21 victories last season. In these days of the designated hitter, it is not hard for an outfielder to prolong his career. But for a pitcher, it is a tremendous achievement. Congratulations, Jim Cott. May you pitch until you have won 300 games. Jim Cott won his last game on August 7th, 1982, 17 victories shy of 300. Sorry, Mr. Pincus.
Yeah, but he did get into Cooperstown. So
he did.
Nice.
Another guy that was a guest on our show.
Jim Cott was the guy that could throw the game in an hour and 40 minutes, which was beautiful.
That's it. July 7th, 1975, the day I turned 7 years old, just a pup, 57 years old now. What is that in dog years? Anything else from either of you guys, or should we just get out of here?
I think we've down the stretch and we've crossed that finish line, and I still contend I won by my big nose.
Mark, I think you did. I've looked at the replay. Your nose took it. Your
Yeah.
nose knows.
There's been an inquiry. We're looking into this, but want to thank Dave Johnson, one of the best guests we've had. Boy, he was great. You could just see that mind's still sharp as ever. For Mark, for Bill, I'm Scott. We are past our prime.